guess this is like the awkward part of the live stream. Yeah, this is probably the awkward part of live stream. Well, if you're coming back to this later, just skip ahead for a bit. Let me know if this works. Well, hell, I'll just start going. So we're going to be playing Card Quest today, while I slowly bake to death in my office. Man, I'm just not good at doing live stuff. This is interesting. Card Quest RPG, something I found during the Steam sale. Probably one of the more interesting concepts I've seen a little bit as far as like getting a card game to not just be another Hearthstone or Magic or whatever clone. 3 campaigns right now. They just released the 3rd one. 4 classes and a pile of equipment. So 12 pieces of equipment per campaign. We're gonna start. Let's do some wizard time. So here on the wizard, you can see there's 6 total slots for equipment. You've got style, where you get to pick different things. So like, for instance, you've got arcane, you've got necromancy. Each of these have different resources and different things you do. Pyromancy relies on fire charges as a resource. The interesting thing about fire charges is if you get too much of them, they burn you. So it's a balancing act between having too much and being able to hurt yourself, or having too little and being able to cast some of your spells. And it also kind of puts a halt on just like slamming out high-level spells one after the other. I'll go through here. So I like the Pyromancy school. Cooling stance makes enemies unaware, which is a really useful debuff that affects most bosses as well. Bosses are generally immune to stun, and a lot of them are immune to other debuffs as well, but unaware tends to affect just about everything. It also lets you draw. Inner Fire gives you extra damage on your next attack, but it also has extra firepower, and generates a little bit of energy and a draw. And then Fire Blast is a nice AoE spread. It attacks 3 enemies, stuns, and also can burn them over time. Looking at the Book of Scorching, Scorch is what this is all about. Firebolt is basically filler. Scorch here basically lets you deal a ton of damage. 12 damage is a lot in this game. Most bosses have at most like 90. So being able to dish out 12 and maybe more is a big part of what makes this sort of build work. Mist scrolls are actually one of the things that make fire work really well because it's another way to dump excess heat. The only basic way you have of getting rid of excess heat is cooling stance and just letting it burn off over time. Mist scrolls give you another option where you can suddenly find other ways to get rid of it. It also enables draw and other issues. And it lets you dodge, and dodging is better than blocking, which are the 2 defense mechanics. The Crow Familiar doesn't really interact all that well with fire, but it does let you see hidden enemies, which is a mechanic that you guys will see here pretty soon. Firestones are magical stones that basically it lets you hit everything on the screen near you for 2 damage and also generate a little bit of firepower. So that's cool. None of these robes are going to be of any use to me, really. Damage ability. Yeah, I think actually the illusion robe just gives a little bit more health, so that's probably good. So we're gonna get started. Yes, I want to replace the current game. Okay. There's a branching path here. The way that this game works is you have a series of 8 encounters per area. You branch out through it. All the ones that you can see don't have a question mark here are ones that I've completed. I need to do the mushroom caves on this run. And then past that, once you have all 3 of these keys, it lets you start over from the 4th stage instead of starting over from the 1st. So let's go ahead and get started. Here we are, stranger. This is my... I don't know if I should do voices. That's probably a bad idea. So each stage has a basic storyline that comes across it. In this one, Dwarven Exile Prince has decided that you need to help him. And of course, being a wizard just looking for things to set on fire, you're like, sure, that sounds good. So you nod to him. Let's go. And it is goblin time. So a couple things all happen at the beginning. You find out there's no hidden enemies, your crow pecks one of the goblins, and then we start lighting things on fire. Goblins are interesting. They run away when they're hurt, which would be a problem if I was playing warrior or rogue. For me, it's not really a big deal, because like I can get them. Scorch for 18 right off the bat. Let's do a firebolt. And so I have 7 fire magic charges. Fire magic? What a weird... Fire charges. If I cast this Scorch, it's going to generate 3 charges. I'm going to hit 10, and then I'm going to take 3 damage. And you don't regenerate health very quickly in this game. It's actually one of the primary limiting factors is health. So I'm going to choose instead to use Cooling Stance. It's going to burn off 4 of my excess energy. It's going to make him unaware, so it's like setting up a fog shield or something. And then I'm going to hit him with a firebolt to kill him. Boom, stage 1 done. Let's see here. So we're going to start with a firebolt. We're going to toss out a firebolt. And we're going to toss out a fire blast. Once you have more options, the beginning levels get pretty quick because you kind of burn through them. So firebolt. He can't run from me, so fire blast you can see hits 3 enemies side by side. Doesn't matter if they're distant or not. Distant is one of the other sort of debuffs. It represents you being far away from the enemy. Rangers tend to rely on this. There are some mage abilities that let you do it as well. Certain things that require adjacency is either to the left or right or nearby. It's a little weird, and I'm not going to question it because it really helps me out here. So, for instance, I can light them on fire again, end my turn, and this hobgoblin, hobble, he did. Hidden enemies. Some more here. Give me some firebolt. Inner Strength is a ability that all characters have all the time baseline. It lets you restore 5 energy, which is the primary resource, or stamina. I'll call it energy. And also draw a card. Let's see here. Nice little mini combo. Do an Inner Fire into a Fire Blast. Inner Fire or Fire Blast is nice because it never generates more than 1 heat, and so it's like a nice efficient way of dealing damage without burning your heat too much. Cooling Stance into a Scorch to dramatically overkill this goblin. And moving on. There's actually music too, but I think I turned it. Oh, there's some music. I'll put it down low. Do a firebolt, fire blast, so stuns them. Stun is a pretty standard mechanic. They can't take an action on their next turn. Firebolt, Inner Strength, fire, and okay. Now we'll use Firestones. This draws a card, generates 2 fire, which won't put me at 10, and will deal 2 damage to all nearby enemies. So. Winning the round, just straight up. Now, let's see here. Fire, Scorch. There's kind of a rotation you go through on these, and one of the things I really like about this game is that rotation differs from character to character. Like on a rogue, you essentially have, like, depending on your build even. So on this one, how much damage can I get in a round without going over my heat charge limit? Because energy is not a super big problem for the fire mage build. You don't use a lot of it, your basic attack, or you can do what I just did. So that right there, if you get up to 10 fire magic, you'll take 3 damage. I do more damage to myself than most enemies do, and in fact in the last game I played through on this build, I totally killed myself. So, I can use my Crow Familiar to draw a card. It's basically just an ability that lets me draw a card at this point because I'm not using souls as resources. Use Cooling Stance to burn off some heat. Fire Blast to deal some damage. And yeah, Firestones to kill him. Why not? Every time you level up, you get a new ability. Some of these are not relevant to me. Mages have different specialties. There's Necromancy, which uses souls, which you get from killing enemies. There's Arcane, which is just a resource that goes up and down and doesn't have a downside. And then there's Fire, that has the whole, you know, if you get too high, it burns you thing. There's also Illusions, which, as far as I know right now, is just a defensive mechanic, but I might not have unlocked the right thing. So... Peck the Bear Cub. If you click on the level thing, you can see here. So eventually I get Fire Mastery at level 8, which is like the most effective thing for me. Gives me a little bit extra energy, lets me start with some fire. So the deal with the... So this is the boss. This is our first boss. Cave Bear and its 2 cubs. Cave Bear starts distant. If you mouse over it, you can see its abilities. Basically, it gets angry when the cubs are killed. It gains Fury, which is what that little multi-sword thing is, and an extra point of attack. Fury is a problem if you're not prepared for it. I'm probably not going to have any issues with it. On some characters, I actually focus just the Cave Bear and like disable the 2 cubs until I can kill the bear. On my mage, I'm not even going to bother. So, murder a bear cub. Oh, Mama Bear's mad. Bear. Follow that into a Scorch on the Cave Bear for like a quarter of its health. Follow that into a Fireball on the Bear Cub. And then I will end. If I timed this right, I did not. I'll just end my turn. So the Cave Bear gets set up. It moves towards me. When an enemy's distant, it moves towards you every turn, but it moves at the end of its turn, so it doesn't attack after moving. It's burning for a little bit, basically a couple points of damage. I'm going to use Inner Strength to regain some energy. Right now I'm at a good spot, so I'm going to Scorch for 15. Then I'm going to use Cooling Stance. One of the important concepts in this game is also discarding. Like, you want to actively discard cards, because you have a pretty small hand size, only 5 cards. I know I'm not going to need another Sudden Mist to dodge anytime soon, so I'm going to discard that to make sure I'm always drawing the maximum number of cards. Unless you have the perfect hand, you always want to be discarding whatever is least effective to you as soon as you're in a position to draw another card. Just, it's a, you know, basic cycling mechanic. So I'm at 4 of 10, but I'm also at 4 stamina, so I'm going to go ahead and end my turn. If you hit someone while they're unaware, it will notify them of your position. So if I end, it's going to take the damage from burning. Yep, down to 9. And now is going to be in a position where I can basically do an fire and Firebolt for 10 and wreck the Cave Bear. Again, the big benefit of this Firebelt, and the reason I really like it, is you basically just shit out damage. You do a lot of damage very quickly, and the only problems you get into are if you find yourself without a way to regenerate energy or a way to regenerate card draw. I'll probably do like one more stage while I'm doing this, because at some point I have to cook dinner. Yeah, so the ability for the crow to find hidden enemies is super useful, because generally those show up at the end of your first turn. You can't affect them when they're not on the screen, so I can't like make them unaware of me. But if they show up right at the beginning, I totally can. I can either make them unaware, or I can just, you know, firebolt them until they're all dead. Hidden enemy is my master. Landmine. There's a lot of these one-turn trap-style enemies. Generally not too big of a deal, since you can just kind of get around them any number of ways. I'm not going to bother trying to kill it. I am just going to kill the 2 miners, and then when it goes to attack me, I'm going to use Sudden Mist. Dodge always dodges the entirety of the ability. So, all the traps die after 1 round, generally. Alright. Firebolt. And Firebolt. And Scorch Sword the Slave Master. That's going to scare all the other goblins who are going to run away. None of these goblins have any ability that can hurt me on range, so I'm pretty much safe now. I've got a whole bunch of goblins that run away. None of them are going to do anything to me. I've got 8 of 10, so I'm just going to end my turn there. and figure out what I can do to kill him this round. Cooling stance into a fire blast. Another one of the things that really the thing that strikes me about this game is that, like, the thing I really like about video games is when we have elegant, interesting mechanical systems. Like, part of it is like playing Magic for a really long time kind of got me interested in those. So the fact that, like, they managed to make a card game where, like, the warrior plays differently than the rogue, plays differently than the wizard, is interesting to me because a lot of times in games like Hearthstone there's much less playstyle differences sometimes. I haven't played Hearthstone in years, so I'm probably wrong. But just the way you approach situations feels very different. So I'm going to start by firestoning. That's going to make all these guys run away. It's going to make them not a problem for me in the next round. I'll firebolt this minecart, making the slave jump off. And then I think I'll be able to, yep, chain 2 fire blasts together and wipe them out. These barricades here basically grant dodge to adjacent enemies. A dodge charge on an enemy lets them basically dodge the first thing that you hit them with, so you can burn them off by using multiple things. It's easier in my case to just kill the barricade. So firebolt the barricade, and let's see here, I'll do a fire blast right here. That'll stun those two. Enter fire to draw a card. Cooling stance to burn off some of that heat. Firebolt to the barricade. And now I'm in a position where nobody's aware of me, so they've all got unaware. So I don't need to worry about doing anything next round. Gotta discard a card, draw more. Now I've got a handful of cards. Defensive fog is really nice because it makes all enemies lose track of you, essentially, and burns off a lot of fired. So it's the most effective defense I have. Go away. Dwarves will jump off the minecarts at the end of the round. And now I just mop up, because from here on out it's pretty simple. And firebolt. And scorch. And a fire blast. And end my turn. Coming up here, first things we look at, we got to deal with the landmine somehow. I either need to deal 10 points of damage to it, which I could do easily with a Scorch, or I need to have a dodge saved up. Dodge is easier to deal with, quite frankly. For now, let's do an Enter Fire and do a Fire Blast on these 3. That'll wipe out 3 of them. Do a Firebolt on this barricade, knocking out the barricade. I will do a Fire Blast on these 3, stunning those 2 and killing the goblin. And now in my turn, landmine goes off. I use my defensive fog, so now they're stunned and unaware. And dead. And it brings us to the end of the level. So, old mines. This is probably a good time to talk about mulliganing. Like in Magic or something like that, you have an ability to mulligan if you get a bad hand. In this case, I have a ton of defensive options and no real need for that many. So I'm going to spend 1 energy. I'm going to draw a new card, or draw a new hand. This is what I'm talking about. Okay, get the firebolt on the barricade. In this case, the Dwarven Foreman is the new boss. His big deal is that when he's distant, he can still attack you, so just being far away from him doesn't help. He also releases explosives when he gets near you, and when he dies, he drops a ton of bombs that you need to deal with in some way. Luckily, the bombs don't have a lot of health, so I'm not too concerned about having to burn through them. So let's go into an Enter Fire, into a Fire Blast. This will take out the barricade and kill this Dwarven Miner. The Foreman's going to get a dodge out of it, but I think that's the most effective thing I can do there. I'm going to spend an Inner Strength. Get me a Firebolt. At this point, I either need to use my Illusion Robes to dodge this landmine, which luckily I have, or I need to draw a card. I have just enough to spend a Scorch, so I'm going to see if that gets me it. Inner Fire would put me over and cost me some health. Use the concentration. And I got nothing. So I'm going to discard the Fire Blast and that. I'm going to use the Cooling Stance. And nothing. Yeah, so I'm going to rely on, you know, Crow Familiar. Okay, this is apparently what's happening today. We're going to rely on the Illusion Robes to dodge landmine. Yep. Alright, so the good news is I can probably kill this guy this turn. So, let's go for a Firebolt into a Scorch. Really quickly, I'll talk about chain mechanics, which is another core function of the game. There's cards, any card that doesn't have Chain Breaker on it will chain from one card to the next. When it says chain here, you know chain's active. It essentially either incentivizes or disincentivizes you from dragging cards in one after the other together. In this case, most fire spells get better when you chain them together. For instance, on Fire Blast, you can see it makes it cheaper, and it makes targets burn for 2 turns. On Scorch, it makes it not any cheaper or anything. It doesn't generate more fire, but it does deal 4 extra damage, which is essentially how much the Dwarven Foreman's got. So we're going to light him up. He's going to throw us a bomb. This is our first item. So it deals 8 damage and stuns a target and deals 4 damage to adjacent enemies. I think they give this to you as a way out of this, because some builds might not be able to get around this whole having 4 health bombs dropped on you at the same time. I think I might be able to do it, though. But I might not. Yeah, I don't think I can. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend the bomb we just got. Now we're going to knock those 2 out, and then I'm going to throw a Firebolt at the last one. So, no harm, no foul. Got to level 5. Got efficient spellcasting, so my energy max goes up. Wizards tend to have really low stamina, energy, whatever you want to call it, and low health. But we make it through. We get a chance to go to the store, which is where we spend our gold. I'm going to buy a bomb, because bombs are pretty handy. The ability to stun a group of enemies and get them off your back for a little bit is invaluable. One of the core conceits of this game is that it's difficult until you realize that one of your primary functions when you're fighting things is to tie them up in some way. If you don't have a debuff on an enemy and it attacks you, you need to have a way of dealing with that attack, either with a defense or an item or something. Because if you only have 14 health and enemies are hitting for 4, and some of them hit for 4 several times in a row, you can die in a round if you end up unlucky. And that's how my last run-through went. I got to the troll boss, I actually killed the troll boss, and then all the other shit the troll boss summoned murdered me before I could get away. So you got to be careful about that balance, because if you overreach, you're going to get hit. And you can get hit pretty bad and get wiped out in a round. Healing items are also rare and hard to find. So you leave the old mines, the dwarf turns to you and says, okay, well, the usurper has more followers. It'd be wiser for us to go through an alternate route. So he gives you a basic story rundown. You can either go through the cave full of mushrooms, or you can go through the dwarven tunnels. Now, I'm going to go through the cave full of mushrooms, because I have not completed it yet. You can see I don't have the key. This cave sucks. I don't think I've cleared this on any character. The big problem with the cave, I'll briefly go in here. So you follow Prince deep into a dark cave, bit of walking, you start seeing some pale blue light. There's these bioluminescent mushrooms all over the place. The cave is problematic because it's filled with 2 types of enemies. One has a mechanic we haven't seen yet, which is damage on hit, which isn't on any of these. But there's enemies that if you touch them, so if you do a melee attack, they hurt you in some way. And then the spore sacks and other enemies of that nature, if you hit them but you don't kill them in one hit, they will release spores, and in this case they give dodge, a repeating dodge every turn to every other enemy on the screen. So instead of it just being like, oh, okay, I've got to deal with this thing, it's like, oh shit, all of a sudden everything else on the screen dodges forever. It's actually a problem playing this as a... oh shit, I forgot. That crow familiar, the one that just pecked that bat, wrecked my last playthrough, because he went over and pecked one of those spores, it exploded, gave everybody dodge, and I never could recover from that. You see here it has the skull and crossbones and this green slime. That's damage on contact. That hits, that affects whenever I hit it. This makes it hard to do with any melee character because you either need to use like counter abilities. Luckily, mages don't have that problem, so I can firebolt away at my leisure. Slime splits out. And a firebolt. And a fire blast. The problem that wizards bring to this specific area is just the lack of significant health. So you're doing this all with very little health and very little margin for error. In this case, luckily these batches have one dodge and you can firestone them out all at once. On Salamander's not a really big deal. He spits fire, but it's just an extra attack. The bats have dodge. The acid mushrooms explode when damaged. If you're far away from them, you can exploit this to, if you're distant from them and you shoot them for less health than they have, they'll explode and hit everything near them, which can be useful to you. Unfortunately, I don't have a way of getting distant on this build, so I'm going to have to just keep killing things the old-fashioned way. So, that. And I went over it. And I don't have that. So we're going to go into cooling stance. You notice the bat became unaware, the small green slime didn't. That's because slimes and other inanimate objects can't be made unaware, which I guess makes sense. Arcane expertise increases your arcane max, which I don't have, by 2, and start battles with 1. Oh, that's great. Super handy. Alright, let's see if I can burn through this. Oop. Yeah, so that right there was my bird pecked at a acid mushroom, which exploded, hurt me, and the bat next to it. Good news is it hurt the bat next to it, bad news is it hurt me. So we're going to try and take out these mushrooms and spore sacs before something can happen to them. Either I need to burn a firestone or anything else of that nature. Concentration. Alright, so I've got a fire blast. We're going to use this fire blast. Okay. Firebolt. Now I can fire blast these two. I can stun them both, or at least stun that one. I can scorch the spore sac. And now I'm safe, because nothing else on the screen is going to do something terrible. Go into cooling stance. Now they can't see me. Now I end my turn. They get spent. Those burn. We're going to fireball. We're going to draw. You can spend 5 energy to draw a card, which was not a super good plan on my part, because now I don't have a option for dealing. Yeah, now I don't have an option for dealing with them. So you see what happens when you get overconfident or overextended. On these... Okay, so I'm at 0 fire, so inner fire is actually really useful now, because it gives me energy and fire. I'm going to get a... use the firestones to burn off their dodge. Use the fire blast there to get rid of them. Use a firebolt here. Then I'm going to dodge with a sudden mist. And... Yep, okay, good. 2 firebolts, one into the other. Bada bing, bada boom. Final one before final boss. Please don't screw this up, bird. Throw attack, and he did. Okay, so I just took 2 damage there because he pinged one of the acid mushrooms. This is what killed me last time, so I just have to make sure it isn't what kills me this time. Stun the 2 salamanders, get them out of my hair. Scorch the shroom, get it out of my hair. Let's see here, kill that. Draw a card. Okay. Perfect. I can still burn salamanders for some reason. I'm not going to stop to think about how that makes sense. And we find ourselves at the final boss. Bird, please peck. Now. Shit. Okay. Yep. Okay. So this is now lost because You can't bring this crow familiar. I totally forgot about that. So this is going to end on a bad note, but the Mushroom Heart, essentially his big deal is that every turn it drains 2 energy from you and deals 1 damage to you, as long as it's not distant. So you have to fight him with somebody that can get distant, or you need to do what I was planning on doing, which is just murdering him really quick, because, again, a Fire Mage can output a ton of damage. However, I can't do 80 damage in 2 turns, so I'm gonna die. We'll play it through, because why not? The other problem is the Spore Sac, when it pecked the Acid Mushroom, it exploded the Acid Mushroom, which hurt the Spore Sac. The Spore Sac exploded, which gave Dodge and Unaware to everybody, except that Unaware doesn't target these guys, so all it did was give Dodge to everybody, which will rebuild every turn. We're going to see what we can do anyway, just because, you know, Goonies never die or whatever. Unaware is totally useless against these guys. Burning some fire at him. Out of energy. The other thing he does is he makes spores. These spores need to be killed in 1 turn, or else they turn into the things we saw before. I'm not even that ill-equipped to deal with them. I just don't, like, as a build at least, but I don't have the ability to do it, like, as a coherent, ongoing thing. I certainly don't have the ability to do it all today. So from Hell's Heart, I stab at thee and immolate myself rather than let it kill me. And there we go. So we died in Mushroom Caves, shows the abilities, or the things we went through, and how many enemies you killed, which rack up pretty quick. Also shows your equipment. So yeah, it seems like probably a decent place to stop. Let me know if you guys like this or whatever. Feel free to leave a comment, or I guess tell me in Discord. I don't think anybody that doesn't know me is gonna see this. So there you go. Okay, thanks, folks. Bye.